Hi guys, my name is Kirsty and welcome back to Upside Down Books. Today we're going to be looking at some fantastic retellings. First of all, I'm really nervous today because I'm actually trying a whole new lighting situation, which I've been toying with and trying to get it right. So it's actually nearly 6 p.m. at night time, which is super exciting to not have to try and squeeze filming in during the day. So if I can get this all working, I will probably do a video in the coming months or weeks or something, just to discuss what I'm using and how I set up my lighting. So I'm hoping this is okay. It looks okay on my preview. I'm really crossing my fingers that I don't just look like a little dark demon, but if I do, I've also already tried filming this once and forgot to mention so many books that I've decided to do it again. So this video is it's really testing my patience. So today I actually have 11 recommendations for you. I love retellings. I love them. I love them so much. I just think they're so much fun and they're really exciting ways to revisit stories that you either haven't read or have just read a classic version of, or I don't know, it's just fun to redo stories. It's things like I really want to read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies because I thought the movie was great, and I just I just think it would be fun. I think it would be fun because Pride and Prejudice was boring. But that's my opinion. So I've got 11 and I've made a list. I've made a list this time, so we're not going to forget any, and we're just going to go straight into this and talk about why I think you're going to love them too. So the first book I want to talk about is Jane Steele by Lindsay. Oh my god, this is a historical fiction retelling of Jane Eyre, which is actually a classic I did enjoy reading. Now, this has a much more exciting premise than Jane Eyre did. I mean, I think Jane Eyre is pretty exciting for a classic at the end of the day, but it's also a big, hefty book, isn't it? But Jane Steele is really cool, and it has a really strong female lead. We look at her losing her family, we look at her place in her inheritance and the difficulties of her inheriting what she's owed, and the places she gets sent to, and how she fends for herself in the world and the person that she becomes. There is some nice Indian representation in this retelling as well, which I think actually blended in quite nicely, because that could have easily been really juxtaposing and strange to fit in. But Lindsay I think has actually done a really good job in squeezing in this extra element and giving this like a depth of flavour to make it a beautiful literary broth. So this is a brilliant retelling of Jane Eyre, and if you haven't read it, like, I have not met somebody who has not liked this book yet. That's all I'm saying. The next book I want to talk about is Splintered by A.G. Howard, and I thought I had a copy of this, but apparently I don't. I haven't been able to find it, so I guess I'm going to have to go and amend that, because I've got book 2, 3 and the novella, but I just don't have book 1, so I don't know what happened there. But this has a great Alice in Wonderland retelling. Now, Alice in Wonderland is probably one of the most popular retellings, or fairy tales to retell, and I'm a sucker for it. If you tell me that something is an Alice in Wonderland retelling, you betcha I'm gonna read it. But this is just fun and creepy and wonderful, and it is quintessentially A.G. Howard's writing. And of course, if it's the first book you read of hers, and it was, I think, her first series that she wrote, then you wouldn't know that until you read her other stuff, and it's like, yep, this woman just has the knack for writing the bizarre in such a wonderful way. I believe the main character is called Alyssa, but it has been a while since I read that, so if I've got that wrong, I apologise. But moving forwards, the love interest, romantic interest, of which there are 2, come in the form of someone called Jeb, I think it's short for Jebediah, who is a human, and also in Morpheus, who is like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland, but in humanoid form. And it's one of my favourite love triangles, because you really just don't know who you want her to be with, and you really don't know who offers the best, and I also was really satisfied with how that love triangle resolves in book 3. So this is just a sweeping tale of all of the bizarre and weird stuff that you expect from Alice in Wonderland. Howard has in no way tampered this down to be like a logical retelling. It's just, this is Alice in Wonderland and it's weird, makes no sense, and you're gonna love it. The fun thing about this series as well is all the books are printed in different colours. So the first one has a green cover, so the text, the actual font in the book is printed in green as well, which is really cool. Anyway, moving on. The next book, I also don't know where my copy is, and that's The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. Now, I have the sequel, and I was quite sure that I bought the first book, but I don't know where it is. Now, this is a brilliant and probably, no, not probably, it is the best retelling that I have read of 1001 Nights. So this is so good. It's so good. It's so good. It's I love this series. So I have actually read about 3 different retellings of 1001 Nights now, and a lot of them are good, but this just takes it to whole new levels. I don't know what it is, but like the character development of Shahrazad and Khalid is just to die for, and if you haven't read this yet, this was popular for a reason, and I want to go back to the year when this was released because I feel like so many amazing series that are just sort of YA staples now were being released back then. This book is filled with nostalgia for me, and it is just a duology, so it's really easy to read the whole story. Now, if you're not familiar with the story of 1001 Nights, then that's absolutely fine. You don't, I mean, in any of these retellings, you don't have to read the original to know, but I think my favourite thing is how true to the idea of Shahrazad telling stories to save her life. Like how truly present. Words are very difficult today, apparently, in the story. So other ones that I've read, such as 1000 Nights, were okay, but they just don't have that sort of finesse that the Wrath and the Dawn has. Nothing will beat that story, and I stand by that. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Shadow Queen by C.J. Redwine. This is such an awesome retelling of Snow White. Now, the thing that I really love about this series is the fact that it's going to be quite a long series. As far as I'm aware, at least that was the original plan. I have only read book 1 still, and each installment, whilst still set in the same kingdom, is a different fairy tale. So this one is Snow White, the second one is Rumpelstiltskin, and then the third one will be something else, and so on and so forth. So I really love that C.J. Redwine has taken on the mammoth task of creating this fantastical realm where all of these stories can come together. Now, there are actually dragons in this, which I thought was really impressive because how does one put dragons into Snow White? But you could say that about anything and everybody puts them in anyway, and like, we love dragons, so it's fine. But this is just so much fun, and probably my favourite retelling of Snow White because it doesn't turn into a Beauty and the Beast-esque telling. When I say Beauty and the Beast-esque, I mean like the character of Belle, I feel, can be strengthened and made very heroic easily. Her character just lends to that sort of character, but I don't feel that Snow White does, and I feel like people force it upon it and then it just feels like a completely different story. So this one is a bit different. There is still fighting and some badassery in it, and she's a great female lead, but this is just a really clever retelling of Snow White that I really appreciated, and the world building is awesome, so thumbs up. So the next book I want to talk to you about is one that I have really enjoyed, and that is the Neverland Wars by Audrey Greathouse. Now, this is a Peter Pan retelling, obviously, and it is one of the few that existed around the time when it came out. We have since got other books such as Everland, and Megan Spooner is coming out with a new book, I think next month or this month, which is going to be a Peter Pan retelling as well. So I'm really excited to see more of them out there because this is such a fun story to work with. There's so much potential for magic and just awesome stuff happening. So this one plays in the idea that Peter Pan, in all of his trips to and from reality, has aged up to a young adult, so it fits the YA category. And the main character's younger sister escapes with Peter Pan to go to Neverland. And there is this war that is going on between adults and children who are from Neverland or living in Neverland, because the adults want to steal magic to sort of power industry and electricity and use it for bad things that would corrupt magic and everything beautiful about it. So there's this wonderful sort of children versus adults war vibe going on, which I think is always a fun idea to play with. So I've read books 1 and 2 and I've still got to read book 3, but I would definitely recommend this if you're looking for a really whimsical Peter Pan retelling, especially if you've ever had a crush on Peter Pan and now you won't have to feel quite so weird crushing on a child. The next book I want to talk about is another A.G. Howard book because, look, I just really like A.G. Howard, okay, it's fine. So that book is Roseblood, and it is a Phantom of the Opera retelling, and isn't that the most exciting thing you've ever heard? Because when I found out that this was coming out and that it was a Phantom of the Opera retelling, oh, guys, Phantom of the Opera is my favourite musical by far. Every time I find myself somewhere where it's performing, I will make the effort to go and see it, even if that means paying for a West End or a Broadway ticket. I say that as if I'm in like London or New York every second weekend. I wish, because if I lived in New York, like I would go once a month or more. I love Phantom of the Opera, but that's beside the point. This is actually a really good retelling of it. I liked the way it was done. It was quite true to the original story. It's set in like a girls' boarding house sort of thing. So this does definitely draw on some of the original elements of the story. We have a main character who sings and has like some strange affliction when she sings that leaves her drained and exhausted. And obviously you have that relationship and all of the weird stuff that happens with the Phantom who is present in this story as well. So this is a very true to the original retelling if you're looking for something more substantial, because the actual, I do have it somewhere, something more substantial than the original, because the the actual classic book, because it is based on a book, is so small. It is so small. The next book is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget, who is just, she's just amazing. She is amazing. So I have really enjoyed this. This was, I think, Kemura's first dalliance into fantasy, which is really exciting and has made me really want to pick up some of her contemporary stuff. I really enjoyed this. I've heard some people have been a bit on the fence about it. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I think it's a really good Beauty and the Beast retelling. I think the main character is fantastic. She is also a disabled representative. I cannot remember what she has now. I think it might be cerebral palsy. I'm pretty sure that's what she suffers from, but that I really enjoyed because we do not see much disability representation or neurological disability representations, and I love seeing it in fantasy because if people write representationals, that was not a word, but you know what I mean, books, then they tend to do it in a contemporary setting or a non-fiction setting, and I think that if you really want to get that coverage and that awareness out there, I think it's really good to see it in fantasy because so many people read that, and I think the people who need to hear it are reading fantasy. So this is a big tick for diversity, and yeah, the story itself is just exciting. You've still got the prince and his handy sidekick who's helping him out, Grey, and yeah, the transformation between beast and human, and it is in a different world, so there's a fantasy realm and there's the real world where the character crosses over from. So this is a great retelling. This really is a great retelling of it, so I think you'll like this one. Speaking of Beauty and the Beast retellings, one that I read recently and also really enjoyed was Hunted. Completely different take on it. This is a bit more historical than A Curse So Dark and Lonely, but it is still fantasy. It's set in medieval Russia, but it is still fantastical, and you have like this whole family with lots of sisters, and the father loses all of his profits and his money due to a trading like incident, and they all end up going out to this cabin they have in the woods, and obviously the story follows on from there that the main character is really down to earth. She has a lot of hunting skills. She's not very feminine for her time, and she ends up meeting the beast, and there's a whole story that goes on from there. I liked how the romance in this really wasn't pushed. It was not so horrifyingly done as Disney does it, I suppose, and it felt a lot more natural, the relationship that was built between the beast and Beauty, and she is called Beauty. She does have an actual name, but her nickname is Beauty, so she's referred to that throughout the book. So this was really good. I thought it was really well done. It's super, super easy to read, very quick, very fast, very, very enjoyable. The next book I want to talk about is one that's gaining a lot of traction at the moment thanks to being selected and included in Fairy Loot's latest box, I believe, and that's Thorn by Intisar Kanani. Now, this book has been one of my favourite fantasy books for a really, really long time. I read an advanced reader copy of it when it came out some years ago, and I have always included it in like my fantasy books that you haven't read yet, or lists that I've done like that, because people have not heard about it, and now everybody's reading it and loving it, and the cover has had a bit of a redo, so it's looking even more beautiful than it originally did, and I'm so excited for Kanani that this has happened because this book deserves it, guys. If you haven't read it, you definitely should. It is a retelling of the Goose Girl, which is a way lesser known fairy tale, and basically you have a princess and her servant and their souls swap bodies thanks to some magic and a witch involved, and all of the drama that entails from there, because they're going from her kingdom to a prince's kingdom that she's betrothed to, so it just puts all of this drama around the wedding because it's a servant who is trying to marry the prince in the princess's body. Oh, it's just great. This book is honestly fantastic, and it is so much fun to read, so please do yourself a favour and go get a copy of it. So the next book is The Looking Glass Wars by Frank Better, another Alice in Wonderland retelling that is a lot of fun. So this one is a little bit like, I wouldn't quite peg this on the same level as A.G. Howard's retelling of it, but I think it is worth mentioning because it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the way that the characters can move between reality and the, like, Alice in Wonderland realm. There's a lot of, like, puddle jumping. I can't remember the specifics exactly, it's been a while, but I do remember, like, characters jumping into bodies of water or puddles and being able to go to the other realm, so that was really fun. I just think that there's a lot of nice imagery in the way that the characters are actually made, and the fact that there is a war, an actual war going on in this realm is really fun as well. So if you're looking for a really sort of easy to read Alice in Wonderland retelling that isn't quite as bizarre as A.G. Howard stuff but still has crazy elements to it, then Frank Better is definitely the way to go, and I believe this is a trilogy. So that brings us to the final book I want to talk about today, and we're going back to an historical fiction retelling, and that is Longbourn by Jo Baker, which is one of my favourite books of all time. I discovered this book completely by accident, and it has since become quite popular, or it was popular, I just wasn't aware of it. So this is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and it's the servant story, which I think is fantastic. So if you are a fan of Downton Abbey or Upstairs Downstairs or any sort of show like that, then this is well worth reading, because it is done really well, and I think it's better than Pride and Prejudice. It's a really fun way to kind of throw some shade on how ridiculous the sisters are and the whole dramas of Mr. Darcy and all of that crap. I just think that this is much more entertaining and much more realistic. So there's also extra elements that are thrown in, because it's sort of a love story between a couple of the servants, and so it does go further. It does go much further and beyond the story of Pride and Prejudice, but it's not particularly long. It's only about 300 pages. So if you haven't read this or heard of it and you're keen on the idea of an historical fiction retelling of Pride and Prejudice, then I would definitely recommend picking this up. Okay, I managed to remember all the books that I wanted to tell you about this time, so I love all of these retellings and think they're fantastic. It is a genre that I absolutely adore. I just cannot get enough of retellings, and I have so many on my TBR that I'm waiting to get to. So let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these, or if you're planning on reading any of these, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.